Hi, I'm Lori Neverman from Common Sense Home, and today we're going to can some green beans from the garden. Now these beans have already been prepped for canning. You can see they're cut into bite-sized lengths and both ends are trimmed off. I just snap the ends off. My sons prefer to use a paring knife. After they've been trimmed and chopped, I wash them up in the sink, and you can use any large basin. And you do want to wash your beans up even if your garden is clean and they're not muddy or anything, because a lot of dust and debris and things you don't really want to eat will get on the beans. So I'm going to get these washed, let these soak a little bit. And then we also need to prep our canning jars. And I'm just going to load those in the dishwasher and run a quick glass cycle. You can also just hand wash them and keep them warm in the oven, whatever works for you, because you always want to make sure your jars are clean and preferably warm, because you're going to pack hot liquid into those. I'm going to get these strained out. Swash those around a little bit. And I'm going to get these all into the strainer and cleaned up and drained out, and then I'm going to start the dishwasher. I'm not going to start it up immediately because we need to film a little bit more and I don't want the noise getting picked up. I need to prep my canner with 3 quarts of cold water, and our tap water is kind of hard, so to that I'm going to add 1 teaspoon of white vinegar, and that will help prevent scaling on the outside of the jars. All right. Our jars are warm, fresh out of the dishwasher. I've got boiling plain water here. This is RO water, so it has been filtered. I've got the canner prepped with hot water, and I have my lids, my 2-piece canning lids, the lid and rings, kept warm on the back of the stove here. And in each quart jar of beans, I'm going to put 1 teaspoon of canning salt. You can also use kosher salt or sea salt, but those might get a little cloudy. Do not use iodized table salt, because that will turn your beans somewhat dark. It will brown. The iodine gives a dark color to your beans. So we start packing the beans in the jars. And this is a little messy. I'm going to pack a few in each jar here and then shake them down and put my salt in, and then go back and fill them up the rest of the way. And I don't think I'm going to have enough to fill an entire canner. That's 7 quart jars. So I'm going to start with the 5, and I have 2 in reserve in the dishwasher in case I do have enough beans to fill them all. I didn't exactly measure my beans, and it never seems that the measurements in the canning book match up exactly with I am not talking right today. The canning books don't match what I end up putting in my jars, so I just eye things up. Been doing this a while. And you want to shake these down so you get as many beans as possible in your jar. Help them get settled in there. When you process these in the canner, your beans are going to float up a little bit, so there will be a little gap at the bottom of the jar when your jar is sealed. But if you pack them in fairly tight, you can help reduce that gap and give a nicer, fuller looking jar of beans. So remember, 1 teaspoon per quart. If you prefer to do pints, just use a ½ teaspoon. And the processing time is a little bit shorter for pints versus quarts too. I'm going to go back around, top these off, and when I get to the point of adding the hot water, I'm going to work to reduce air bubbles in these too. I've got just a plain wooden chopstick. You don't want to use metal. Wood or plastic will work, because if you use something like a metal knife, you might scrape the inside of the jar and potentially create a crack well, a scratch that can turn into a crack. Oop, one fell in the salt. Alright. Oh, I just may have enough for 7 jars. These are filling up faster than I thought. So, go back through. Shake, shake it, baby. Mommy just smack that, but I find a good shake gets the job done. It hurts my hand less. But my mom used to beat the heck out of her canning jars. It was kind of funny to watch. Thwack, 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 thwack. And you see, as I'm shaking them, these jars were full up over the top. We can get those beans to settle down in there a little bit more. Shake it up, baby. Twist and shout. Almost there. And one more time. Top everybody off. You're going to need to leave an inch of headspace at the top, so you don't want to fill these all the way up to the lid. You want 1 inch between the top of the beans in liquid and the lid of the jar when it goes on. So we top them off, but not too full. Ba-da-bum. Don't crochet, don't need all liters A. All right. Pretty good, pretty good. Couple more there. I think we are ready to rock and roll and add a hot liquid. And I'll get these 5 done first, and then I'll go back and pack up the rest of the beans. So this is just plain, clean, clear, boiling water. You can see that's plenty steamy. That's another reason that you always want your jars kept warm. You don't want to be putting boiling water into a cold jar because the whole thing can explode, which is bad. And the 1 inch headspace is to right below that bottom ring around the neck of the jar. I had a different canning ladle that had a little bit shorter handle, and truthfully I like that one better, but after many years of dutiful service, it busted. So I got this bad boy, which they were selling at the hardware store as a booyah ladle. Gets the job done, but it is not quite as handy as my old ladle. They just don't make stuff the way they used to. I guess not that many people can anymore, so I figure, heck with it. I don't need to build the right stuff. Alright. 1.5 more jars. My steaming glasses. Oh, very hot. Alright. Last one in this batch. I tend to like to set it up assembly line fashion because you can just go through boom, 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 fill, salt, add liquid. I turn this down for a minute. And then we go through with a chopstick. Like I said, wooden chopstick or plastic spatula, something that is not going to scratch your jars. And you want to ram that down there, work around through the beans, remove any air bubbles that are trapped in the beans as well as you can. And there'll always be a few, but you don't want too many. I'm going to work that around. And here's where you double check and make sure you've got your headspace correct. I think I might end up getting a spoonful out of this jar and putting it into that jar because this one looks like it's riding a little high. And headspace is important because during your processing time, when you use a tested recipe, your processing time is enough to make sure that the heat evenly penetrates the food, and it also drives all the oxygen out of that headspace. the space between the top of the food and the lid. So you never want to short your processing time, and you always want to use tested recipes. Said this one's right a little high. Take that off of there. Checking levels. That looks good. Looks good. Really close here. And I think these are good. And it's good to look from the side so you can see on level and make sure that they are where they're supposed to be. And then before you place the lid, you want to wipe around the rims of the jars to make sure there's no drips that can interfere with the seal. Now with something like beans, you're just working with water here, so it's not a big thing. There's a small chance that something problematic might be on there, but if you're working with something, say, like jam or jelly, those drips would cause a lot more problems because you've got a seriously sticky substance that would interfere with the seal. So I'm going to place these. And these are pretty warm too, so it's a handle with care type of thing. My mom used to have the toughest hands. And you want to snug these up just finger tight. Air still needs to escape from underneath that lid, so you don't want to reef on it. Just snug. And that's good. Okay, I'm going to take a tiny minute and I'm going to put these over in the canner. Hot stuff, baby. Yep. Right. And you want to make sure that these aren't touching. And I'm going to grab my last 2 jars out of the dishwasher and get this heated back up. I did have it piping hot, but it was boiling too aggressively, so I turned it off. I just filled up our last jar. I have not quite enough for another full jar, so we'll eat those for supper instead. And I'm going to get this into the canner. Again, making sure nothing is touching. And grab our lid. Line that up. You look on the top of your canner, there'll be an indicator that says close this way, open that way. So you want to line that up on your canner. And apparently I have flipped my canner the wrong direction because my line up is on the wrong side. Boop. It works so much better when you do it the right way. All right, so there's an indicator on there. It says put your arrow here. It said works so much better when you do it the right way. Up and close. I'm going to bring this up and allow this to heat until we have a steady flow of steam out of this vent right here. Once I have a steady flow of steam, I let that exhaust for 10 minutes. So I'll set the timer once that starts flowing. This will take a little bit to go because I did have it turned off for a few minutes. Then once you expel the steam for 10 minutes, then we'll put the regulator on. Whoop. Pressure regulator, that will sit there after the 10 minutes. And then we'll start watching the pressure gauge. And then once that regulator's on, then I bring up the pressure to around 11 pounds. And it stays over 11 pounds for 25 minutes. And you want to always keep it above your minimum pressure, but not so high that you get into the danger zone. So your goal here with quartz is 11 pounds of pressure for 25 minutes. And there's more detailed instructions on the for altitude adjustments and other types of canners on the website. And now I'm going to sit here and wait and watch. And while I'm doing that, I'll probably start in. We've got some more preserving to do. I'm going to start tidying up and getting everything ready. It's a good thing to plan ahead, to have other projects going on in your kitchen while you wait for your canner to go. That way you can be close by and keep an eye on things. We have steam. Do not put fingers in steam. Steam is very hot. So, time to set the timer. 10 minutes of just the steam before we place the regulator and allow the pressure to build. Our 10-minute timer just went off, so I'm going to go ahead and place that regulator and let the steam build up. Now you see here, there's this little pop-up valve on the front of the canner, and the pressure is going to build up there first, and eventually that little plug is going to pop up and lock into place. Once that pops up and locks into place, then you'll see the gauge start to go up. And sometimes it sputters a little bit. Carefully, you can wipe that off, but just make sure to keep your fingers out of that, because that is crazy hot and you can get burned if you're not careful. So be warned. So you can see this is up and sitting steady, and we've got over 11 pounds of pressure. I set the timer for 25 minutes and that's counting down. And now I'll be working on other things in the kitchen and keeping an eye on this to make sure that the pressure doesn't go too high, but that it stays above the 11 pounds. And the processing time for quarts is 25 minutes, pints is 20 minutes. It's the next day. These have cooled completely. I took off the rings and wiped these down for any spills. And then we label with the contents, green beans, and the date with a Sharpie marker. And we do want to check the seals on all the jars. And you go and you press on the top of the jars. There should be no flex to the lids. This is an example of a jar of dill pickles that did not seal. And you can see that lid will flex up and down when you push on it. That is not sealed. This is going in the fridge to be eaten sooner rather than later instead of long-term storage. And that is it. These are going to go down in the basement, either the canning pantry or the root cellar, and they should be used within 1 to 2 years of when they're processed.